going to ask you in themes around that, but I'm going to move to a different topic for now, which is unclassified briefings to parliamentarians. And for this, I'll ask the court registrar to pull up COM 363, please. And if we can scroll down to paragraph 126. Prime Minister, for your benefit, this is a discussion about a succession of memos suggesting that essentially unclassified briefings be provided broadly to parliamentarians. And what we see here is that NSICOP made this recommendation in 2018 and 2019, and there are 3 memos that were intended to go to you in some way, shape, or form. So one in December 2019 that was sent to PMO but never followed up on, and we heard from your staff that that sort of fell through the COVID cracks at the beginning of the pandemic. One in December 2020, which was discussed within PMO but ultimately not actioned, and that the report mentions one in 2022, which was never finalized or even sent to PMO. So just to confirm, first of all, that none of these memos ended up reaching you. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And we know that this initiative of broadly briefing parliamentarians eventually did happen in June 2024. So if none of these reached you, first question I'd like to ask is, should this have happened earlier? And are you troubled that it didn't?
My position has always been that providing more briefings to parliamentarians is a good thing. I am fully in favor of it. We all receive security briefings when we first get elected on not leaving documents hanging around, being careful about when you're speaking about delicate matters in a restaurant or on an airplane or anywhere people can overhear. We learn the basics of phone hygiene and how to keep your information secure. And I'm a huge believer in empowering parliamentarians to be able to be safe and thoughtful in how they do things. The briefings to parliamentarians that you receive when you get elected and security briefings ongoing are not directed by the government of the day. They're directed by the House of Commons itself, the Sergeant at Arms, if it's a matter of security, the Speaker's office. Briefings to all parliamentarians is not in general something that the government of the day is directly involved in. But these various documents are certainly something. CSIS has the authorities to go to either the Speaker or the Sergeant at Arms and request for those briefings. These briefings didn't get to me, but these decision points didn't get to me, but I made it very clear throughout conversations that I would have approved of or encouraged briefings of parliamentarians. There is a process that I see regularly invoked. About every week or so, I sit down with the clerk of the Privy Council, and we go over changes to the senior ranks of the public service. We talk about particular issues that are coming forward, and part of our regular meetings is the clerk highlighting, okay, there's this note that we sent to your office that has been there for a week or two or for too long, and we need a return on this because this is important and we need this to be acted on. And I'll say, okay, we'll follow up, and we dig it up from the pile of notes that we get and make sure that we prioritize that. In this case, nobody, neither CSIS, through their minister to me or directly to the clerk or to the NSIA, flagged that this was something that was of importance to them that was stalled. And therefore, as you pointed out, they were not acted on in my office.
Why was your approval being sought, do you think? Like, was your approval necessary for this initiative?
As I said, my approval was not necessary for this initiative. It certainly wasn't wrong for them to check if they wanted to. I wasn't insulted that they did, or I wouldn't have been insulted that they did. But it wasn't part of the necessary steps. Often we get things for information. Oh, by the way, the minister is going to approve this. You should know about it, but it's within his or her authority to do. This is for information, not decision for you. Those are notes that we receive regularly that obviously when they're relevant or germane, they get dealt with either through the office or directly to me. But in this case, the authority was not necessarily mine to give.
Okay, and would it have fallen to a minister, for the Minister of Public Safety, for instance?
I mean, it could have, or the CSIS could have checked in with its minister. The Minister of Public Safety is directly the minister that oversees and is responsible for CSIS. I know that the director of CSIS has direct access to the Minister of Public Safety in a very regular way. If there have been concerns around this, the CSIS director could have gone to the minister either for a signals check or for help in moving it through the approvals process in the Prime Minister's office, or to even check that maybe I should just go straight to the Sergeant at Arms in Parliament to actually take on this briefing. And as far as I know, CSIS did not bring up this with even its own minister.
Okay.
I have one question, Mr. the Prime Minister.
Oui.
Do you have any idea why no reply was ever given to all of those that requested the authorization?
Well, I think as was stated in the first case, it was in process when COVID happened, and we all moved to different priorities and virtually. In other cases, in the third case, it actually didn't get to my office. In the second case, no, I don't know why.
Okay, because if an authorization is asked from your office and no authorization is needed, at least in your view, usually do you, not you personally, but your office give the information to the person requesting the authorization, or not at all?
It depends on the amount of the amount of notes, the various priorities of them as they go through. I really can't speak to the challenges around that particular one, other than saying that I was always very clear that briefings to parliamentarians is a good thing.
Thank you.
Okay, the next possibly related, possibly not topic I want to talk about is ministerial accountability in the foreign interference space. So if we can bring up CAN 030999. Prime Minister, these are notes. This is not something you would have seen. This is notes or minutes from DMFI, which is Deputy Ministers on Foreign Interference Committee meeting in April 2023. And if we can just scroll down so we can see the third and fourth bullet there. The NSI at the time here was Jody Thomas, and this is a discussion that was had at that meeting on essentially where ministerial accountabilities lie in the foreign interference space. So if we see that, I think it's the third bullet on the page, the NSI mentioned that the day before public safety, the clerk and deputy clerk had a discussion about foreign interference, during which the clerk mentioned that the ISR, so this is in the period where the independent special rapporteur was doing his work, seems as though they're comfortable with the panel in sight, but what's becoming more obvious is gaps on how FI is handled between elections, specifically what's the role of deputies, staff, and where's the ministerial accountability more broadly. The second bullet then says, as a result, the NSIA has asked PCO to begin work on mapping this. So how is intelligence circulated? How are ministers informed? How do they exercise their ministerial accountability? The governance, she says, seems to work well at the deputy level and even between PM and PMO, but that gap at the ministerial level may be a concern. So we discussed this a bit with the NSI at the time, Jody Thomas, and what she said about this, and the reference for the record is at WIT 151, paragraph 81. I won't bring it up, but I'll just tell you about it. The conversation around ministerial accountability was that in the NSI COP and NCERA reports, as well as the media leak discussions, everything needs to go to the PM. But in fact, in a Westminster style of government, ministers have accountabilities. So that was the nature of the discussion that was being had at this meeting. From your perspective, how does this play out? Was there an issue with ministerial accountability in the foreign interference space?
I think what you're outlining is sort of the second part of the conversation. The first part of the conversation is clear to me, and I can't really speak to what Jody was sort of digging into there. But it's very clear from the first bullet the gaps on how FI is handled in between elections. I think the important thing to remember is when we created the site task force, the panel of 5, it is because during an election, during the writ period, the government is in caretaker mode. So there actually are significant limits on how and whether ministers and the prime minister continue to be ministers or prime ministers even during an election, but they are limited in what they can actually go out and say, particularly if they're about to say that an opposition party is compromised or benefiting from interference by a third country in an election context. That would be destabilizing and you know of concern to do. That's why we set up the panel of 5 top public servants to be able to address during a writ period and publicly speak to what a particular piece of foreign interference is trying to have as its impact on an election. That makes total sense as a structure during elections, but during a by-election, where we've actually made sure that the site looks in on that, you don't have a caretaker convention. During a by-election, the government continues to be the government. The Minister of Public Safety or Foreign Affairs or the Prime Minister continue to be fully empowered to do all their works. And therefore, it would be during a by-election if there was a significant concern that a particular country was engaging in massive misinformation, disinformation, it would normally be the minister who would do that, who would talk about that and be accountable for that communications and those actions. But because of the partisan nature of the event that is a by-election, there's a discussion on, well, whether that ministerial accountability should be there around that or whether officials should take on the communications even though it's not in a caretaker convention. There are arguments to be made on both sides, and that's the kind of issues that we're grappling with around interference in our democratic institutions and the fact that one party was selected by Canadians to wield the full authority of the state, which in general times is very clear and, you know, hopefully without partisan spin or questioning. But in situations of electoral contexts become more delicate. So where we could say, oh, the caretaker convention means that government is not fully active and leaning in as ministers and prime minister during an election period, what you actually do during a by-election is the question that they're digging into around ministerial accountability.